Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for today's webinar, Enhance Your Practice, Engage Clients, and Market Yourself. My name is Caitlin. I will be moderating this webinar. I am a marketing manager at the Myers-Briggs Company. And I just wanted to take care of a couple things right at the top before we get started. So the first thing, this is being recorded, and we will be sending out a copy of the recording and the slides in the next couple of days. So you don't have to worry about that throughout the presentation. Number two, we will be using the questions box today for any chat as well as any questions that you have. So just make sure you pop anything into there, and we'll be moderating that throughout the webinar. We will do our best to answer some questions at the end. If we don't manage to get to all of the questions, we will be putting together responses and sending that out as well so that everyone gets access to all of the information that people requested. This webinar will run for about an hour, and I am so excited to hand it over to our two experts today, Marta and Melissa. So I will hand it over to you both.
Beautiful, thank you, thank you. I'll go ahead and get started. This is Marta. Just a little bit about me. I'm a principal consultant with the Myers-Briggs Company. Most of my work is as certification faculty for all of our assessments, including the Myers-Briggs Type Indicator. What else? My PhD is in depth psychology, which is based in Jung's work, Jungian and archetypal studies. It's a kind of a cool field to have a degree in. And then I am also a professional certified coach with the International Coaching Federation, and definitely bring that perspective to my work with assessments. I'm gonna let Melissa introduce herself next. She gets the points for the style photo, so I'll hand it over to her.
Thanks, Marta. Hi, my name is Melissa Sommer. I am the Global Content Marketing and Public Relations Manager at the Myers-Briggs Company. I am also the host of the Myers-Briggs Company podcast, if you have listened to that. I am MBTI, FIRO, and CPI certified. And my style points photo is because on the side, I am a photographer. So I have a photographer photo on there. And I do a lot of visual arts, everything from painting to mixed media to graphic design. So I will be sharing some information just kind of from brand perspective, marketing perspective later in the slides. But first, I get to hand it back to Marta, who's going to share some great information about MBTI.
Excellent. So I will get things started. Here's what we're going to cover today. I'm going to start off with addressing misconceptions of the MBTI assessment, of which there are many. Also share some tips for sharing the value of the MBTI framework and workshops, and then get into some tips for designing workshops and activities to engage participants. At that point, I will hand it over to Melissa, who will talk about walking through different practitioner resources and how to find them, providing guidance on marketing yourself and engaging with your target audience, and then sharing tips on how to utilize easy tools and the Myers-Briggs Company content to boost your social media presence. So we're packing a lot into our hour. Because of that, we may or may not have time for questions at the end. So as you have them, just type the questions into chat. If we do have time at the end, we will cover them at that point, but we do plan on sending out a document with responses to those questions after the webinar. So even if we don't have time to address them during our hour, we will respond to them. So put them into chat when you have them. Don't feel like you have to save them for the end. Alrighty, we'll start off with misconceptions about the MBTI assessment. There's a couple of resources I want to point out now, and we are also going to share them again when we finish up today. The first is right on the Myers-Briggs Company website, and you can find this under resources. But if you put in Myers-Briggs Company MBTI facts, I think you will be able to find this fairly easily. It's a great web page that will answer all these basic questions about the MBTI that you might encounter. So use that a lot when we're looking at the misconceptions. The other piece of content that I utilize a lot when we're looking at this is a webinar and white paper that the Myers-Briggs Company has titled Creating Clarity, Addressing Misconceptions About the MBTI Assessment. And that was done by Patrick Kerwin, who is an MBTI master practitioner and has been doing MBTI certification for years. So I highly recommend checking out these two resources, and we will make it easy for you to do that. Alrighty, first thing you might hear, Briggs and Myers weren't psychologists. And that is true. They were not psychologists. But a couple of things about that. They both actually had a bachelor's degree. And if you think about this, at that time, not many people had a bachelor's degree in the United States, only 3 to 5% of women, 5 to 7% of men. So the fact that they had a bachelor's degree at that time was something. The other thing to think about is the instrument, the MBTI assessment, is based in the work of Carl Jung. And Carl Jung was a psychiatrist, a psychoanalyst, founder of analytical psychology. So he definitely did have those advanced degrees. And it was his theory the instrument is based on. Now, Briggs and Myers spent many, many years studying Jung's theory of psychological type. I always tell people, if you want to learn about psychological type, don't start with Jung's book, Psychological Types. It is a lot. As someone who studied Jung's theory beyond psychological type, but definitely the Psychological Types book, it's a handful. And so the idea that they spent so many years studying his work, we owe them an immense debt of gratitude. Now, advanced degrees are great, but they're not the be-all, end-all. And there's lots of people who have made these incredible contributions without advanced degrees. Right? That being said, we do have people with all those fancy letters and those advanced degrees who have taken on the mantle of the development of the MBTI assessment and continue to make the updates. So true, they did not have that bachelor's degree, and all of these other facts, I think, can show that that isn't really a requirement for that. Second thing you might hear is that most traits are on a spectrum, right? The MBTI assessment uses artificial binaries. So a couple of things in there we want to address. First thing is, it is true. Most trait assessments are on a spectrum. They measure behaviors. But the MBTI assessment is not a trait instrument. It's about personality preferences. It's based on type theory that says, hey, I have a preference for one or the other of these two opposites within that preference pair. I always think if we want to make this easy, we think, well, trait assessments focus on how much, but the MBTI is a type instrument, and type instruments focus on which one. That which one are those 4 preference pairs, which one in each of the 4 preference pairs. And there is so much research out there that shows that these are not artificial binaries. Right? They are, in fact, true opposites. Another thing you might hear, well, Jung even said, there's no such thing as a pure extrovert or a pure introvert. And this is true. Jung did say that. Right? We want to remember that Jung's theory focuses on how do we prefer to take in information and how do we prefer to make decisions. How we prefer to take in information through sensing or intuition, right? How do we prefer to make decisions through thinking or feeling? The idea is that each one of us will have a preference within that pair. Now, when we look at these 4 mental processes, as we call them, sensing, intuition, thinking, and feeling, we can layer on extroversion and introversion. And we can use those mental processes in the inner world or the outer world. We can look at sensing and say, oh no, extroverted sensing and introverted sensing. Sensing used in the outer world, sensing used in the inner world. We can look at intuition, thinking, and feeling in that way. And that's the way Jung would have looked at these mental processes. So the truth is, we all use extroversion, we all use introversion. No one is a pure extrovert, no one is a pure introvert. And that's part of type theory that tells us we all have parts we introvert, we all have parts we extrovert. It also gets into the type language why we don't like to say, oh, I'm an introvert, I'm an extrovert. Right? You'll notice if you listen to me talking throughout, you'll hear me always say, well, I have a preference for this. I might have a preference for sensing. I have a preference for feeling, right? But not I'm a extrovert, I'm a sensor, I'm a thinker. Right? Language matters. So we want to make sure we're using the best, most appropriate type language. All righty, up next, Jung said, every individual is an exception to the rule. And this is another instance of, well, true. Jung did say that. And what Jung was looking at with this is that, yes, we have personality preferences, right? But we don't want to make assumptions about people's preferences based on what we see. Right? The idea that we can look at somebody and say, oh, this is your preference based on your behavior, that's not all there is to it. Type is about mental energy and not about behavior. And we have so many other things that impact, right? That we can't just look at somebody and says, oh, someone who has ENFP preferences is the same as every other person who has ENFP preferences. No. We have different life experiences. We have different cultures we were raised in. We have different relationships. We have so many impacts, right? The MBTI assessment, in particular, the step 2 assessment, helps us to tease out those impacts from the environment. But because of those impacts from the environment, we will not be exactly the same as someone else with the same preferences from a type perspective. Right? We think of type as it's a 16-room house, right? So it's not boxes, it's rooms in the house, and we're all in different rooms. And even if I'm in that ENFP room, I'm going to be doing different things. I always think, well, if I'm in the ENFP room, some people are going to be sitting at the desk studying, other people are going to be sitting on the couch looking out the window, other people might be on the floor doing a little bit of yoga. Who knows? We're all different. So even within that ENFP space, we have differences. Right? We can't explain someone solely by their personality type. And then I love this statement by Isabel Briggs Myers. And ENFP is like every other ENFP, like some other ENFPs, and like no other ENFP. Because I would probably say it now with more updated type language. Someone with ENFP preferences is like every other person with ENFP preferences, like some other people with ENFP preferences, and like no other person with ENFP preferences. Next up, continuation on this a little bit. I always like to think about this, you know, when Jung was talking about these type preferences and using it as a way to describe our personalities, he wasn't trying to sort of pinpoint everyone in to one of these boxes. Again, 16 rooms in the house, right? And everyone is different. But this quote of Jung's, they are just as arbitrary and just as indispensable. And I would not for anything dispense with this compass of my psychological voyages of discovery. The idea being that, yes, they point us in a direction, but they're arbitrary. It's not going to be 100%. They just get us started in that right direction. And it's up to us to have those conversations, to develop our self-knowledge so we can use this compass to discover more about who we are. All right. Oh, a favorite of mine. People are really ambiverts. Oh, ambiverts. So when we think about this, right, when we always use this analogy, oh, left-handed, right-handed, most of us have a preference, right? Now, just because I have a preference, I'm left-handed, I prefer to use my left hand. I don't walk around all day with my right hand tied behind my back. I use both hands every day. Just because I use both hands doesn't mean I'm ambidextrous. I am far from ambidextrous, right? And just because we use both extroversion and introversion every day doesn't mean that we are all ambiverts. We can use both, but still have a preference for one or the other. How about this one? Psychologists don't even use the MBTI assessment. And there's a typo in there that I did not catch. Huh, look at me. Alrighty, so psychologists don't even use the MBTI assessment, right? Well, let's think about what the MBTI assessment is designed for. It's not meant to be used to diagnose and treat psychopathology. So if you are a clinical psychologist, it's correct. You will not use the MBTI assessment because it won't be the right tool. It won't be what you will use for the work that you do. That being said, there are a large number of psychologists who do use the MBTI assessment for non-diagnostic applications because that's what it is designed to be used for. The MBTI assessment just flatters you. Okay, yeah, we might hear that. But let's talk about what the MBTI assessment is designed for, right? It's not designed to diagnose. It's not looking at good or bad. It's not looking at normal and abnormal. but it is giving descriptions of the different types of what we would typically see. So it is going to say, hey, here's some strengths that we would see with each type. But if you read the materials, those descriptions also include, hey, here's some challenges, here's some potential blind spots, maybe some areas for development. All of these pieces are part of Jung's theory, because Jung's theory, his analytical psychology, was really designed in service of what he called individuation, right? That idea of finding wholeness between the conscious and unconscious aspects of self, right? Trying to get to that development of our personality. And strengths are a part of that, as well as challenges and areas of development. So there's no better or worse types, right? They're all have strengths, all have challenges, all have blind spots and development areas. The MBTI assessment isn't reliable. I've definitely heard that one before. And the idea is that no, actually, there's a lot of research out there. You can look at the research on our website, where we look at reliability through the lens of internal consistency and retest reliability. And those two measures, which are common measures within the psychological community, right, you will see that our internal consistency and our retest numbers are well above that standard that we're looking for. Right? And larger psychological community says, hey, we want 0.7 and above. That's considered good reliability. Well, our numbers, 0.9 and above, 0.8 and above, they're actually considered to be quite good in terms of reliability standards. The MBTI assessment isn't predictive. Guess what? You're right. It is not predictive, because it's not designed to be predictive. That is not what it's all about. It's one of those situations where someone is trying to make the MBTI do something it's not designed to do. Right? It's a misuse of the assessment. There's no evidence that suggests that there is a predictive nature to this assessment. Now, there's research on occupational attraction. Doesn't mean that if I'm attracted to that career, I'm going to be better at it. So we can't use this assessment to predict who's going to be a better architect. But we can look at it through the lens of, oh, someone with these type preferences might be more interested in specific careers, but not about predictability. So when I'm looking at these articles or watching these different videos out there that are saying, no, MBTI isn't so good, you want to take a moment and pause and use some critical thinking. You identify the source data, right? Where did this information come from? Verify that the articles are referencing the actual assessment. Imitation is the sincerest form of flattery, right? And so there are so many different assessments out there that try to make it look like they're the MBTI, but they're not. And if they're criticizing one of these other assessments, they're not criticizing the MBTI, right? So we need to remember that. Check that the article reflects an understanding of the basic underpinnings of the assessment. Right? If someone doesn't understand the assessment and they're criticizing it, they maybe need to go back and learn a little bit more about what that assessment is all about. Verify the article is referencing appropriate use of the assessment. For example, the assessment is not designed to be used for selection. There isn't that predictability piece. And if they're saying it's not a good assessment because it doesn't predict, well, that's correct, right? It doesn't predict. And so that's an inappropriate use of the assessment. Be aware of the assessment biases within the article. Someone may have a bias for another assessment. And so because of that, the MBTI assessment is the one that's not being seen in a positive light. And then we all have biases. And so we want to be aware of our own assessment biases as well. All righty, I'm going to go on to this next section. I feel like I'm going through this at warp speed, but there's so much we're trying to share that I am kind of going through it rather quickly. But hopefully that's working for everyone. Alrighty, tips for sharing the value of the MBTI framework in workshops. Just a few simple tips. So the first is know your audience, right? Know who you're working with and why, right? You want to know what are their needs? What difference are they hoping taking the assessment will make for them? What problem are they hoping to solve? right? Then you can provide an informed response based on this information. Second tip, review your resources and develop your way of sharing the value. Consider this. How will you share the MBTI framework and its benefits? What's the languaging that works for you? What value have you found in taking the assessment and exploring your results? One tip I have is tell your stories. Making it personal makes it more relatable. So find your stories and use that as a way. Find your way of sharing the value. Tip 3, respond to common criticisms before they come up. They're going to come up, right? So be proactive in addressing those potential concerns. Be prepared to respond. Have the resources to share. Tip 4, seek out opportunities to share your expertise. Right? Get your name out there. Be the expert in the field. Be the voice that people listen to. Part of doing that is the more you use the assessment and have real-time practice responding to questions, the more naturally and effectively you'll be able to respond. The more learning opportunities you design and facilitate, the more you'll know what resonates with those you work with and what helps them learn best. Right? Be that expert. Get yourself out there and develop that expertise. And finally, designing workshops and activities to engage participants. Or at least finally for me, after this section, I will hand it over to Melissa. All right, so tips for designing workshops and activities. For this, I'm going to turn to some learning from the Global Learning Partners, an organization that focuses on designing learning experiences for adults. And one of their core teachings is around the 6 core factors of learning. And so keeping these in mind can help us design effective learning experiences. Now, I have 6 of them here. They're not in any particular order. They're all important. So it is an order of importance. All 6 factors are critical for designing effective learning experiences. First thing we want to think about is immediacy. Right? The idea that we want to design something so people can immediately use the information. I think with adults especially, that's important. Sometimes with kids, we're like, oh, you need to learn this so that when you're an adult, you'll be able to do X, Y, and Z. We can't do that with adults. We need information that they can immediately put into action, right? And so we want to design around their needs. We want to plan around what's the anticipated change? What do they want to do differently? Right? And we have to get information about, well, who are the people that are going to be there? What's their current situation? What's the place and the space we have available for this learning? What's the time frame that we have? What's the timing? Is it the end of the quarter, beginning of the quarter, a Friday, a Monday? Right? All of that will help us design. And then we can think about the content, the learning objectives, and finally design those learning tasks. But it all centers around the learner's needs. Because if we design around the learner's needs, then we do have that immediacy. Then they will be able to immediately do something with what they've learned. Second core factor to think about is relevance. Now, when we have a day with individuals, or an hour even, right, there's so many things that we can think about, so many things we can put into that experience. And sometimes we have our favorite things. Oh, I want to do this task. Oh, I want to have them experience this. But we want to step back and think about, what do they really need? What do the learners want to focus on? Right? We have all this possible knowledge, skills, and abilities we could maybe fit into our time frame. But our design process should be very intentional to really hone in on, well, wait a minute, what do the learners need to walk away with? Third tip is to really remember respect. We need to respect our learners. Part of respecting the learners is learning ahead of time what they're all about. Ask them questions, right? Study their website, their documents, the videos that are available. Maybe you might even have a chance to observe them in action, or maybe it is observing those videos. But the more we learn about the learner's world, the more respectful we can be in understanding who they are, what has brought them to this learning experience, why do they want to learn about the MBTI assessment, how are they planning on utilizing it, right? So get into the learner's world. Next tip focuses on inclusion, and I'm using inclusion here in a little bit different way. What I'm talking about with inclusion is making sure that everyone has a chance to learn, and not just for me, right? As the person running an MBTI session, I don't want to be what we call the sage on the stage. In Global Learning Partners, we talk a little bit more about being the guide on the side, right? And so if I am the person who's facilitating this learning, I want to make sure that people have a chance to learn from each other. Because just because they didn't know they had a preference for sensing or intuition before the workshop doesn't mean they don't have lived experience using sensing and using intuition. So I want to make sure that it's a learning-centered approach so people can learn from each other and not just listen to me. One of the things I always keep in mind is the less talk, the less learning. So I want to make sure that I'm giving more opportunities for people to talk, not just to listen to me, but to talk to each other, because that's when the learning occurs. Fifth core strategy here is engagement. How do we get people engaged in the learning experience? One way to do that is to use visual, auditory, and kinesthetic learning tasks, where people have a chance to see something, hear something, engage in something. It speaks to all different types of learning. So if we can design that and teach holistically, it's going to help people be engaged. If they're just listening, they're not going to get as much out of it. And not everyone is going to connect with that listening. So I want to make sure that I give them opportunities to hear something, but also to see something. Maybe it's a PowerPoint, maybe it's visuals, maybe I'm face-to-face and it's on the walls. And to do something. If anyone's ever been to any of my trainings, you'll know I love to use card sorts, right? Because that engages people in that kinesthetic way, and auditory because they're talking to each other, visual because they can see what's on the cards, right? So teach holistically. And the final tip here is think about safety. And that's not just physical safety, although that, of course, that's important, but also that psychological safety. And one of the ways we do that, I think, keep in mind what we call learning tasks. And this is something Jane Vella, who was instrumental, was an individual who started Global Learning Partners, right? A learning task is an open question given to the learners with all of the resources they require to respond. That's safety, because we're asking them a question. We're giving them an opportunity to share their experience. That's respect. But we're giving them the resources they need to respond. We're not asking them to give us the impossible. Right? So that is one of the ways we create safety in that learning experience. I feel like I've been talking a lot, but I'm right on time, so I love that. And I am going to hand this over to Melissa and rest my voice a bit.
Perfect. Thank you, Marta. So I'm going to share a couple. The first thing, practitioner resources and how to find them. And then we're going to go through a little bit about some of my top marketing tips. We'll start with the practitioner resources and how to find them. So next slide. So one of the biggest ones that to keep in mind, a lot of the things that Marta went over, like frequent questions that people have, we built out a page specifically to answer these questions. So it's the Myers-Briggs.com/MBTI facts. This page we did in collaboration. Actually, I believe research did most of the heavy lifting on it, but it is broken out by question. So you can look at the question, and then each of the responses are also broken out. So there's, a 1 or 2 paragraph response. And if you want to dive in deeper into the research or the answer, you can expand that section. So this is a great one to have, in your favorites bar, or just kind of keeping in mind that this was built for you, for practitioners, for people who have questions too, but mostly for you to find the quickest information when it comes to the commonly asked questions around the MBTI assessment. So next slide. The other one that you can also find in there is the Creating Clarity white paper. It talks about, I believe it's the 10 or 11 main common criticisms that we hear about the MBTI. We have a blog that has that, but it is also in a downloadable PDF white paper form. It was written by MBTI master practitioner Patrick Kerwin. And you can find that, I believe it's on the MBTI facts page. It's also right now on our homepage. If that picture that's at the top, kind of the first link that you can click underneath the header, it's listed there too. So that's another great resource. And then website resources. So I don't know how many people on this call have gotten deep into these sections, but on our website under resources, there is a drop-down list, case studies, webinars, guides, and then the two that I feel like are the biggest ones for practitioners that you may not know are all resources, and then MBTI shareables. So the next slide has a picture of the all resources. Oh, sorry, there we go. So these resources, two important things to know about this page that I think will really be helpful for you all is the products and services dropdown. So when you're looking at these resources, and this is a huge resource library, you can actually choose, hey, I want to only see resources related to the MBTI. And what that'll do is filter out everything else so that you're just seeing all of the resources related to the MBTI, whether that's a webinar, case study. And if you go to the next slide, you'll see resource type. So a lot of people also don't think to look at this, and you can filter for both, but you can filter especially for guides, or what we call basically any sort of ebook that's not a brochure is a guide. So you can filter by MBTI and then by guides. Infographics are in here too. And then we do have a specific call out for practitioner resources. So those would be training tools like how to use the MBTI in leadership development coaching, things like that. We also have all of our research here and all of our webinars and technical briefs. But yeah, so that resources section of the website is a really, really rich library that you can find a lot of the resources that you can then use, you know, whether you're using it in your training, using it for your own learning as far as using the MBTI in different ways, but there are a lot of resources there. Next slide. And then underneath that all resources, there was the MBTI shareables. Again, don't know how many people know about this, but I'm just sharing what I thought would be most helpful for practitioners. Typees, I don't know if you know typees, they've been more commonly used in the UK, but they are here on this MBTI shareable page. These little characters not only have your type, but they also have a color coding relating to the dominant function and color coding relating to that throughout these. They're pretty interesting. Sometimes they're fun. Personal typees gets deeper into the MBTI step 2 results and has a word cloud associated with that type. And then you can also look at team typees, which are, that's a whole thing that you could go into. Next. And then also on this page, MBTI shareables, you've probably seen type heads before. These are that profile picture that has the 4-letter type and then a bunch of description words around them. Those are downloadable as, I think you can download as a PDF and as an image file, but you can use those. And then also stress heads. I love the stress heads. I know when I was working in the office, we had our type head and our stress head posted on the wall next to us because the stress head is the upside down profile and basically has a whole bunch of descriptions of what stresses out each MBTI type listed in that type head profile. So again, these are great resources if you are, you know, if you've already done an MBTI training and kind of to keep type alive, or just to go through and share, or even if you're putting together a workshop, you can go in and download the type heads and show a couple on the screen and then give people that link, or, you know, or send it out, whichever you're doing. And then lastly, backgrounds for virtual meetings. We have created multiple backgrounds at this point. Some are MBTI type related, where we have 16 different backgrounds. And if you want to have your MBTI type as a background, you can do that. I know in particular, our sales team has found that it's a great conversation starter. So possibly when you're going out and prospecting, talking to potential clients, a lot of times it's just a good way to get the conversation going. All right, next slide. All right, marketing yourself and engaging your target audience. So when I was putting together the slide, I've been in marketing for, it's been over 10 years now, but I was trying to think of, okay, if I had, 5-10 minutes, what is the absolute most important thing that I could tell people that I think would be the most impactful and make the biggest difference to when you are marketing yourself as, marketing yourself and your business as an MBTI practitioner. So next slide. And there's one big thing two big things. One is around video, images, and text, and the other thing is about readability. So next slide. The important thing, and you'll look at this slide, and I'm sure if you did what most people do, you glance at the slide, there's a lot of words on the slide, and then you immediately go down to the moving picture, which is the SpongeBob flipping through the book, right? So you probably know this just by thinking, you probably know it intuitively, but have not maybe thought about it. But look, the order as far as when people consume content is that people are more likely to watch a video than they are to look at a static image, and they're more likely to look at an image before they're going to read text. So when you're putting content together, whether you're putting together an email, whether you're putting together, a flyer, you can't put video in, but whatever you're creating to put out there to try and find customers or try and find your target audience, keep this hierarchy in mind. Because instead of writing, or maybe in addition to writing something about, MBTI type and leadership coaching, say, is this something that you could put in a video? Or if you are doing something where you're writing it out, maybe it's a blog, is there a way that you can make this content more visual? The key to this is that basically the likelihood of content being consumed is, the formula for it is the expected reward divided by the effort required. People lose skills over time. Literacy is one of those skills. People are busy. We all know we have an immense amount of information coming at us that we didn't have in previous generations, previous decades. But basically, if something seems like it's going to be very rewarding, people are going to be more likely to consume it. But also, if it looks like it's going to be easy, like easy to read, easy to watch, people are also more likely to consume it. If something looks like it might have a minimal reward, but it looks hard to read, like a research white paper, people are less likely to consume it. So just keep this in mind when you're creating any sort of content or marketing information for your practice. Next slide. So I'm going to share a couple readability stats. Readability is all about, if you don't know, it's all about how easy something is to read. I believe most people on this call are practicing in the US, and this is an insane number, but it's true, is that if you are writing above a 6th grade reading level in the US, which is intermediate or above, you are losing half of your potential readers. They did an update of this stat in, I believe the last update was 2017, so we should have another one coming soon, but these are the US prose literacy rates. So you can see on the far left, that like tealish bar is non-literate, we're not reading at all. About 15% is below basic, so we're talking about below a 6th grade reading level. Basic, which we're talking about 35% of the population, is 6th grade or below, right? So you may think like, well, most of the people that you're selling to probably have a much higher literacy rate than that. While that may be true, keep in mind that we're not just talking about literacy rates, we're also talking again about likelihood of content being consumed. So if I look at something, and even though I may be able to read at a 12th grade reading level, if I'm looking at something that's a 12th grade reading level and I'm looking at something else that is the same content, it's telling me the same thing, but it's written at an 8th or 9th grade reading level, most people will choose that 8th or 9th grade reading level over something that's harder to read, even though they can read at a higher level. But the thing to keep in mind here is, again, looking at this chart, if you look at the two right-hand columns, the intermediate and the proficient, those are above a 6th grade level. That's only half of your readers, right? So yeah, it's, to me, this is mind-blowing, but also really good to know. So next slide. So when we're keeping this in mind, here's some of the things that, as far as when you make reading easy. So they did a bunch of studies on this. A piece of writing that was edited from the 9th grade to 8th grade level, just changing how easy it was to read. 67 more readers read a wire service story, like a press release. 75% more readers read a local newspaper story. A piece of writing edited from 9th grade to the 6th grade level, so we're taking it down 3 levels, 80% more people were willing to read the story. And then another thing that comes into readability, in addition to grade level, that's kind of part of the grade level or how you score writing, is the average number of syllables per word. Generally, shorter words are easier to read. And so they took a piece and they said, okay, it used to have 1.7 average syllables per word, and changed it to 1.3 average syllables per word. 93% more readers read the story. 82% more people read the entire piece. Those are big numbers. So making your message easy to read, and we know, in this digital age, you're probably doing a lot of writing when it comes to pitching your business. Making a message easy to read is the #1 way to increase readership. It is incredibly powerful, and most people don't think about it because they think, well, if they don't know about readability, but also they think, oh, I want to sound more professional. I want to sound really polished. I want my business to sound valuable and that value to, merit my prices. So I'm going to make this sound higher level. I'm going to make this sound more intelligent by making it harder to read. But that is the opposite of what you want to do. Next slide. So a couple writing guidelines. You guys will receive these slides after, so you don't have to try and write all these down real quick. But 42 words is the optimal length for a print paragraph. 36 words is the optimal length for an online paragraph. And the reason and that's still going down, and the reason that is happening is also because a lot of people are reading on mobile. 2 sentences is the average length for a comfortable online paragraph, while 3 to 4 sentences is the average length for a comfortable print paragraph. 14 words per sentence is another average, but 90% of people will read it if it's 14 words, but you shorten that sentence to 8 words and you have 100% of people reading it. Another huge thing that I have been taught in so many writing courses that I've taken is that the #1 word that people read, that people are drawn to, is the word you. So what you don't want to do as someone who's writing about, even though you're writing about yourself or your business, is you don't want to, what one of my writing teachers said, you don't want to wee on your readers. So when you're writing something, you can have, a little bit that talks about who you are, maybe in the about you section or a little line or two, but in general, you want to flip your sentences so that you're writing to the reader, so that you're telling them what you help them with, how their problems will be solved by writing and keeping the word you in there. So keep in mind, it's not, here's what we can do, here's what we offer. It's how you're going to solve this problem, how this will benefit you. So you is a really important one. Next slide. All right, so the top 3 takeaways for this one as far as readability: using familiar words, using short words, paying attention to sentence length and paragraph length. The next one, I have an example on the next slide. The tools that you can use, storytools.com/readability is my favorite. Hemingway app is also a new one. And then, ironically, ChatGPT or any other AI writing service, you can put in a paragraph of text and say, hey, ChatGPT, can you please rewrite this paragraph at the 8th grade reading level? And it'll do it. And that's great because AI can be very helpful in that way. But next slide. So this is just an example of story tools, storytools.com/readability. You can put in, basically when you first come to this page, you will see a big empty box. You can put in, I think it's up to 5,000 words of text, but don't quote me on that. But you put in that text and it will give you this result. This is the top level result. These are different ways that they rate reading levels. The main one that you can pay attention to is the average grade level, the one at the very bottom of this readability results section here. The information that I had put in when I first put in the paragraph that I did, it was at a grade level 23. That is incredibly high. I think I may have got this one down to a grade 14 reading level. But again, it's just to check what you've written and keep in mind that the easier you can make something to read, the more likely it is to get read. And when you're writing marketing material or sales material, you want people to read what you're writing because you want them to know about your business and how you can help them. Next slide. So this slide, excuse me, this is once you put in that information in Story Tools and you're scrolling down, this is another section, sentence information, and you'll see I circled the 3 that I brought up in the previous slides, which is the syllables per word on average. This one was 1.18, which is not great, but could be better. Words per sentence. A lot of people don't think about the fact that the longer your sentences are, the more difficult they are to comprehend. Even if it's something where you have a comma or 2 in a sentence and you can break it up and just make that into 3 shorter sentences, that will help you immensely. The flip part to that on this one is that sentences per paragraph was 2, which is great, but when your sentences are 44 words long, it benefits you more to have shorter sentences than it does to have shorter sentences per paragraph. That said, go ahead and break up those paragraphs. 2 sentences, 3 sentences per paragraph. Most of us are not writing, except maybe if our director of research is on the call, he may be writing research papers, but most of us are not writing research papers, and we can have those shorter paragraphs because they're much, much easier to read. Next slide. All right, boosting your social media presence. I think on here, social media is really, it's about how much you want to put into it and how engaged you want to be in it, and really also your audience. There are tons of groups online that you can find. I know LinkedIn has groups, Facebook has groups. So if you want to try and find customers that way, it's a great way to find customers. One way of doing that is by providing information that people are going to find valuable. And again, hopefully easy to consume, like videos and pictures. Next slide. But one of the easiest ways to do this, if you're going to do social media, especially if you're an MBTI practitioner and you're doing it for your business, is just by going on and sharing the things that have already been made. And for us, we make a lot of content that we put on our Facebook pages and our Instagram pages. I know we have a TikTok. I personally am not on TikTok, but I know the content is there too. And on LinkedIn. Next slide. So when you're looking at this, for example, and again, you're going to get these slides, but just for your FYI, just kind of as background information that you're getting that most people don't know, is that we have 2 instances of social media on Facebook and on Instagram and on Twitter too. I didn't include the other one on Twitter, but basically anything that's the social media that's the Myers-Briggs Company is going to be us talking about things that are specific to our company. Some of those things are going to be usable to you as an MBTI practitioner. Some of them are not. Now, the thing that I feel like is the, secret that not many people know that you now being on this webinar get to know is that we also have accounts, which are the Facebook and the Instagram account for MBTI specifically. Right? So a lot of these we're talking about just the MBTI. We're sharing information just about the MBTI. And if you want to click next, some of that information, a lot of that information are things that you can just reshare directly, whether that's just resharing it to your page, whether that's taking a screenshot and reposting it. We've already done a lot of the legwork on these things. You want to click next, please? Perfect. So for example, this is one, we have stuff about our podcast. You may or may not want to share that. And if you click next again, we have things. This was one that was on the MBTI Facebook page. We have a lot of articles that we land through our PR work around how to use the MBTI framework in different ways. This one specifically is from Brit & Co., which is a end user, kind of the 25 to 45-year-old female demographic, but it's how to nurture friendships and make new ones as an adult. And we've put together this information, put it on Instagram so that it's nicely formatted. And all you need to do is go on and you can just, hit share. You can add it to your story. You can add it to your own page and click next one more time, please, Marta. And yeah, here's another example. I believe this one, let's see, it's squares, so it may have been on Instagram or Facebook, but again, super shareable. Learning strategies for judging and perceiving MBTI preferences. This is there for you to just use and share and reach more customers that way by using things that have already been created. And because it's coming from our company, that the information is legitimate and it's not, it's not like some of the other ones that claim to be MBTI that are out there that then put out information which is not necessarily accurate. Next slide. Last thing, as far as marketing, if you are not a designer, that is totally fine. Again, with social media, we have put all this stuff designed in, and you'll have to forgive the dog pictures. This is my personal Canva account that I'm sharing. So there are some pet portraits in there. Who doesn't love a smiling golden retriever or lab? So that's good. But yeah, Canva. If you haven't heard of Canva, Canva is kind of like a cheater's graphic design free online software. You can pay to upgrade, but the free part is amazing. So as you can see on the top, you can do a document. It's kind of small, but those little circles, the white circles with the primary color icons in between, document, whiteboard, presentation, social media, video, print products, website. I haven't played with the website much, but underneath, you can make a Facebook cover image. It'll have the correct Facebook cover image size, which is the image that's behind your profile on Facebook. A Facebook post and landscape, you can put together Instagram Reels, you can make your own Zoom virtual background. Next slide. And the next couple slides that I'm showing you, these are just a couple screenshots that I pulled from the template. So I said, okay, I want to make a Facebook post. And so the left picture is all the free, well, most of them are free, but free and paid templates that you can use. You can click on it, you can edit it the way you want, you can change colors to things, but these templates are already designed for you. The next picture to the right, I specifically searched coaching in the top as far as coaching templates, and all of these templates came up like totally different brand and style. But if it's something where you want a quick, polished thing to put, a piece of content to put on social media, Canva is a great place to start. The one to the right, I had searched the word professional in templates. This is what it came up with professional templates. I mean, it's, as far as your brand, it's great if you have brand colors or you have a font that you use all the time kind of for that consistency, but it's that consistency is not going to make or break you. It looks more professional if you have it, but it also looks really professional just to have things that are designed like this that you can just use. So that's another bookmark I would recommend is Canva. Fantastic resource. Next slide. Perfect. And so now I'll hand it back over to Caitlin.
Great. Thank you both so much for sharing all of that information. It's super helpful. I was taking notes myself. So I just wanted to go ahead and get us wrapped up. The first thing I wanted to say was, just as a shout out, these three pictures are of our sales team that are on this call right now with us, and they are the account managers that you can reach out to if you have any questions about any products that you might want to use, which products to use for which, challenges or goals. And they can help you navigate our site and help you find some of the resources that we mentioned in case you can't find them on your own. So just giving that little shout out to Holly, Nancy, and Jen. If you have any questions after this webinar, you can feel free to email them. You can also email us, and you can respond to the email we send you with the recording, and we can get you into touch with one of them as well. So the next thing we're going to do, we have a little bit of time left, so I'm probably going to only be able to ask 1 or 2 questions. So the first question, I think, I'm not sure how easy this will be to answer right this minute, Melissa. It is, where can you download the resources for the typees? Is it outside of the Elevate platform?
Yes, so the typees are, as far as I know, outside of the Elevate platform. If you go on the website, our website, themyersbriggs.com, and you go to resources, and then you go all the way to the bottom of that drop down to MBTI shareables. That's where you can find all of those typees, type heads, Zoom type backgrounds. All of those are under our website, resources, MBTI shareables. I don't actually know if they're also on Elevate, but I know that they're there on the website. Yeah, we can look into that one.
Yeah, and see if they are there. If they are, we'll include that in the follow-up email as well.
I think I can say they are not on Elevate.
Okay, there we go. Confirmed, they're not on Elevate.
But I said 95.
Right. Okay, great. Okay, the next question that I have is also for Melissa. Would you recommend having separate accounts for personal social media and a business-related personal social media?
Ooh, it depends. So I personally have separate accounts for my photography and for my personal stuff, just because photography is very visual, and there are things I want to share there. That said, for my other visual art stuff, I just use my same account, because my same personal account, because I feel like the benefit of doing that, especially if you're a smaller business or if you're looking to make relationships and looking for a customer base that you might already have friends or network in it, you personally, versus having a separate professional brand, but also, as long as you're keeping in mind that those 2 accounts are being used for the same thing and you're not sharing things that are maybe inappropriate or might turn people off, it's a really good way for people to understand and get to know you personally by having your personal account. And for example, you're telling people you're an MBTI practitioner on your personal account. So I think it really depends on what type of customer you're going after. Are you going after a smaller business? You're going after customers who might want that personal connection? Or if you're going after, for example, much larger customers or customers who are more professional, you might want to separate that and have that separate account, just so that it feels like it's more professional, because it's not intermingling with your personal account.
Perfect. Okay, great. Well, then that is all the time that we have for questions for today. So I'm going to go ahead and wrap this up. Like we said, if you have any other questions, you can feel free to send them to us, to webinars@themyersbriggs.com, or you can send it to one of the sales reps that we had listed out on the slides, or you can also respond to the email that we will send. We will be sending out the recording. More than likely will be it'll be next week, and you can respond to that email with any questions as well. So I will go ahead and wrap this up. Thank you so much, Marta and Melissa, for presenting all of this information. And thank you everyone for joining us.